Yes, good evening. I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. I'd like to thank you for taking the opportunity to view this presentation. As you're aware, my name's Dwyer. I'm the Chief Information Officer in relation to our firm. And gentlemen and ladies, what I'd like to do is to present to you a research proposal which I have undertaken on behalf of our firm, which examines the feasibility of a project that's commonly referred to in the industry as bring your own device. It represents a major deviance from what we normally encounter in what would be considered to be the traditional business model. It involves, as I hope you will see by the end of this presentation, a number of significant savings, both financially and in terms of goodwill and morale in relation to how our organisation performs its business. Now, I apologise for being a little bit late this evening. I have encountered some technical difficulties in relation to a PowerPoint presentation which I prepared for you all. There's some compatibility problems in terms of, and this is probably a little bit humorous coming from a Chief Information Officer, but there's some compatibility issues between a PowerPoint presentation which was prepared using Microsoft technology and this video which is actually being sent to you on Mac technology. So the two don't seem to interface very well. So what I endeavour to do, having regard to the time constraints, is to actually get this emailed to each of you. I believe that you should have it now in your inbox, and from there we can actually go through and have a look at the project, the results of the project, and discuss the financial feasibility of it. Probably the first question that as senior executives you want to know is, firstly, what is it, this concept that I'm talking about, that bring your own device? Now, if you have a look at slide number 1 that I sent to you in the intro, it gives you a fairly clear and concise outline as to what it is. And essentially, it is what it sounds like. It's the ability for employees to bring their own devices to work, to have those devices interface with our existing technology, and it allows them to actually perform their functions, their core business, by using their own technology. Now, you will see that it relates to smartphones, laptops, tablets, and it gives them the ability to use machines that they're familiar with, and to basically have the portability and the flexibility to perform work and conduct work, without being constrained to the traditional, as we are now, desktop-mounted technology. Now, the next slide, and I've tried to be concise with these slides, outlines to you the advantages to our firm. You will see that probably the first advantage, which I think you'll all agree is fairly significant to the operation of our firm, it has considerable savings in terms of hardware costs. As each of you would be aware, the continual replacement and maintenance and upgrade of our hardware is a considerable cost, and I might add at this point in time a necessary cost which we have to bear in relation to how we conduct our operations. There is empirical evidence, as you'll see there, that suggests that productivity will actually increase with programs of this nature. As employee satisfaction, as an employee motivation increases, so does productivity. I should indicate that a number of the peer-reviewed articles that I've located in relation to this are very much in the infancy, but everything does appear positive, and there does appear to be a positive correlation between productivity and this program. You'll see there at number 3, proponents of the system indicate that there is a clear increase in terms of morale for the organisation. The last terms there are fairly difficult to correlate a financial advantage to the firm, but they're clearly things which would assist in the overall goodwill of the company. It's convenient to employees, it gives them flexibility, and look, it allows for off-site work. Gone are the days where employees can't access the internet when they're at home or on weekends or anything like that. With smartphone technology, this can assist them in being able to access everything they need off-site. Now, there are some significant disadvantages that my research has managed to identify. Probably the one that's going to be of most concern to all of us is the potential for security threats. It's a very real concern. My research has uncovered a large amount of information whereby organisations have outlined the very, very real potential for security breaches occurring as a result of this system. One article that I found was actually from the Defence Signals Organisation, which is an intelligence-based military organisation that monitors computers and internal and external intelligence threats, and they've identified basically the potential of this bring your own device system as being a risk to organisations, to external threats. There's a very interesting article that I've referred to in there that clearly states that they believe that any organisation which takes on a system of this nature really has to put in place some fairly strict security systems. Now, you'll see there that I've indicated, as well as the real potential for security risk, we will have some upfront costs in terms of maintenance issues. There's going to be numerous different devices which are operating. We'll need to make sure that our system is able to cope with both the added demand and also the differing devices that may be seeking to use the services. Again, it's not just security threats in terms of hackers, things of that nature. There's a very real potential for security risks associated with viruses. Because you've got multiple external nodes all looking to use our computer systems, viruses, we have to be vigilant to ensure that viruses don't get in through one of those external sources. Now, there's also going to be some training and compliance issues and costs associated with initially setting up the system. That's only to be expected. Now, obviously, there's going to be a need for us as well to ensure that within all of our off-site, all of our locations, there's a capacity there for hard, wireless technology as opposed to hard wiring technology. Now, probably one of the things that you all would like to know is what are the experience of other companies in relation to this. Now, without delving into any corporate espionage or anything of that nature, a lot of the freely available literature that has been able to be viewed cites a number of companies as being able to successfully implement this program. Companies which I have been able to find information in relation to include Apple, Cisco, Ingram Micro, and a company by the name of Kimberly-Clark. Now, all of those, two of those are IT industries. One of those is a retail company. The other one is a service-based industry. All of them have actually reported to varying degrees extremely positive results as a basis of implementing this system. Now, in the articles that I've had these organisations referred to, they've cited increases in productivity, they've cited increases in speed and ease of use of systems, all basically assisting with productivity. They've indicated that security became an increased issue, but something which none of them can say that there was anything adverse that was experienced. They've also indicated that there's been some teething, compatibility and synergy problems associated with this system. Now, if we go to the next slide, We'll have a look at what infrastructure would be required and how this will affect our organisation. Now, look, we have the basics in place. Obviously, we would require a secure server, which we have now. We may want to consider some sort of cloud technology. And also, obviously, we'd have to have the capacity for wireless technology within each of our individual stores. Now, there'd obviously have to be some compatibility software that allows the server to be able to interact with all of these external nodes. And I noticed that there's a number on the market. There's a few that are listed there on the PowerPoint slide. This should not represent a insurmountable startup cost to our organisation in terms of implementing this system. Now, there's a number of practical problems you'll see down here that are listed. The devices are owned by the staff, so there's problems in terms of ownership of the actual information and software once it's actually downloaded and once it's actually placed on the individual machines. We need to implement some sort of a strict policy in relation to this, because that could become very significant, particularly when you have staff leaving, staff being dismissed, or staff just basically being careless and losing or letting other people access their machines. Who pays the bills? Telephone and data usages. Obviously, there's going to be increased costs for employees in terms of being able to use this system. Obviously, employees would be very reticent, I would imagine, to actually bear all the costs associated with data usage and telephone services. We would have to put in place a policy that allows us to monitor and keep tabs on legitimate usage and legitimate business expenses. There will be considerable resistance to any change within the organisation if employees across the board were of the view that they were basically being financially exploited. So in implementing any policy of this nature, it's vitally important that we ensure that we make sure that legitimate costs are being borne by the organisation. You'll see down there there's a number of questions there in terms of what happens when the product is lost. I think I mentioned that before. Now, the significance of that is that whilst the employee owns the product, owns the equipment, the information that's contained on there that they've used to do their work for our organisation is actually owned by us. Now, it's not just a case as well of letting sensitive information go with the machine. We really have to be careful that we're not committing any breaches of privacy, any breaches of trust, any offences pursuant to the Income Tax Assessment Act or anything of that nature. So they're very real considerations as to how we deal with situations of that nature. And obviously, and I've mentioned it a little bit later on, obviously concepts such as risk management will have a very real effect as to how we deal with that. Obviously, one of the biggest threats that appears to keep coming up in all the literature is what happens when employees leave. Obviously, they want to take their equipment with them, and quite often contained within that equipment will be very sensitive product information, very sensitive customer bases, information as to how to contact clients of our firm. So there has to be real policies and procedures set in place, and real ways for us all to be able to manage and deal with those type of situations as and when they occur. And they will occur within the lifespan of any organisation. As we go over to the next slide, we'll deal with best practice. Now, when it comes to best practice, there's been a number of articles and references that I've been able to have regard to. Look, best practice appears to be have clearly articulated policies and procedures to deal with instances that may arise. there appears to be no great surprise in a number of the issues that the firms keep talking about. The risk of security breaches, the risk of viruses, and the risk that staff leaving or being disgruntled have on a firm are things which should be able to be identified and dealt with through the implementation of some fairly strict procedures. All staff have to be made aware of the security implications. They have to be aware of your loss, theft and termination policies and procedures and what's to occur in relation to each and every staff member in that instance. Now, one thing that came up as well was have different protection levels for various employees. Obviously, as executives, we have regard to a different level of information than obviously our store managers or our individual accountants or even our support staff may be required to have. So developing an IT strategy that allows us to only allow people to have access to the information that they require as and when they require it to do their work would be an important means of protecting the organisation from having information disseminated or lost or stolen. You'll see down there that I've made reference to ensuring firewalls exist for protection of viruses, implementing regular data backup so that if there are any threats, either external or through viruses, that we have very, very regular backup data required. Now that's going to be fairly significant, particularly if we're dealing with clients' taxation records and they're going to be required to be kept and able to be substantiated for a number of years. We can't have a risk whereby all of those records are not backed up in a timely and secure manner. Talks about having security access to individual usernames and passwords and cancellation of such security access features as and when staff leave or are terminated. You'll also see down there the last one, protect intellectual property rights, including your client base. Now, we all know in business, in a service-orientated business, that our clients are the lifeblood of the organisation, and quite often when people look to move on, they look to take some of those clients of the firms with them. Obviously, we have to put steps in place to ensure that any system of this nature is able to be managed. Now, the threat is that obviously when staff ordinarily leave, they don't have physical access to the intellectual records. However, with a system like this, where they've got smartphones, tablets, laptops, and they can, and quite often do, access information off-site, there must be a way for us to then restrict and limit that ex-employee's ability to be able to access the client information. Now, I notice that we've been going for 18 minutes, so I thank you very much for bearing with me. Now, look, as executives, we all want to get to the bottom line. You'll see that included within the email that I sent you is a fairly detailed Excel spreadsheet that goes through and discusses each of the relevant factors that you need to consider when going through and having a look at the viability of the project. You'll see that it provides clear financial advantages to the firm. As I said, these are detailed somewhat in the Excel spreadsheet that's provided with these notes. You'll see that the net cash flow for the firm is $13 million after the 6-year life of the project. So it's not an insurmountable or insignificant increase in net cash flows that's coming to our firm. The payback period is approximately 4.5 years. Okay, from the commencement of the project, payback is 4.5 years. Now, the net present value is almost $2 million. The internal rate of return is 13%. The profitability index is 1.20%. Having regard to all of this, it must be considered that we could not state that we are industry leaders in this regard. There are certainly a number of other firms who are out there taking advantage of this, using this as a competitive advantage, increasing their profitability, having regard to their bottom line, and basically lowering their costs. Over the 6-year life of the project that I put together, you can see that the cost base is going to be significantly less if we develop and implement this policy as opposed to continuing with our existing system. You'll see down there the recommendations that I've put on the slide. On the next slide. The recommendations are that the project represents a clear strategic advantage to our business. It allows hardware costs to decrease considerably over the life of the project. Compliance costs are very front-end loaded. A financially sensible decision for our firm to be making within today's current economic climate. And implementation of the project provides business with a profit as opposed to maintaining the existing system, which is also require considerable hardware cost, maintenance and upgrades over the life of the system. So, look, having regard to all of the factors as outlined within the project and the reasoning behind it, it represents a tangible increase in profitability of the firm. It also increases the profitability in ways which are intangible and cannot be empirically measured. It talks about morale, flexibility, the ability to do off-site work, the ability to empower staff and allow them to deal with tasks as and when they become necessary, as well as decreasing hardware costs. Some of the things that we do need to consider, but it's not all good news. A system of this nature means that we need to remain ever vigilant in relation to security, and we need to really take some time to consider the implementation and amendment of our organisation management systems. Well, I hope that this has been of assistance to you, and I trust the decision you make will be based on both on this presentation and also the PowerPoint presentation which I've emailed to each of you, and the accompanying Excel spreadsheet. Once again, I do sincerely apologise for the technical difficulties we've experienced with trying to integrate our PowerPoint presentation into this video presentation. As you are aware, ladies and gentlemen, I'm available at any time. You have my number. There will be issues which you will want to discuss and consider in relation to this project. Look, it does represent a significant deviance from the way that we have been doing business, but you'll see in the figures that I've prepared, it does represent considerable savings and considerable net benefit to the organisation over the 6-year period. On top of that, and I haven't gone past the 6-year period because the figures are quite significant at that time, one may expect that after that 6-year period there's going to be a lot of increases in terms of savings to the business, because let's face it, our hardware and our infrastructure, if we remain in the present system that we're in now, the costs are only going to be increasing, whereas if we implement this strategy, a lot of the hardware costs are actually borne by the employees. Finally, I thank you for your time, and again, if there's anything that I can do to be of assistance to you, please feel free to call. Thank you.